Thank you to everyone for joining us today. My name is Yaron Schwartz. My pronouns are he, him, and I am an Associate Director for Partnerships at the Tent Partnership for Refugees. I lead Tent's work globally with LGBTQ refugees, as well as our broader portfolio of work here in the United States. And I'm joined today by my colleague Desmond Neo, who leads Tent's work in Canada and the United Kingdom. We are really proud today to be co-hosting this webinar with the Human Rights Campaign and ORAM for mentors in the United States and Canada to receive additional guidance and training on how they can effectively support an LGBTQ refugee through this mentorship program. In terms of what you can expect on today's webinar, we'll start with brief introductions by Tent HRC and ORAM, provide you with an overview of the LGBTQ refugee context in North America, review the curriculum that you should all utilize when mentoring an LGBTQ refugee, offer you recommendations and tips on how to best support an LGBTQ refugee through this mentorship program, and facilitate a conversation with a mentor who participated in the first year of this mentorship program. And then we'll leave around 15 minutes at the end to answer any questions that you might have. Before we begin today's conversation, I just want to start with some quick housekeeping. First, with the exception of Tent HRC and ORAM, everyone on this webinar is muted. And if you'd like to ask a question, which we strongly encourage you to do, please type it in at any time in the comments section, and we'll do our best to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. And my colleague Desmond will be monitoring the chat throughout today's webinar. Secondly, this webinar is being recorded and it will be available afterwards, and we'll share the link with the program coordinators at your companies. So please feel free to share this recording with any of the mentors at your company, but we ask that you don't share it publicly for now. And with that, I want to start off with introducing you and telling you a little bit more about us at Tent and who we are as an organization, and then I'll pass it over to my colleagues from HRC and ORAM. Just in terms of a little bit about us, the Tent Partnership for Refugees was started by the founder and CEO of Chobani, which, if folks aren't familiar with, is a major food company here in the United States. And Chobani has hired a significant number of refugees as Chobani employees, and they've been some of the company's most hardworking and loyal talent. And so our founder, Hamdi Ulukaya, having seen his own ability as a business leader to make a meaningful difference on this issue, and having seen the contributions that refugees made to his business, started Tent in 2016 with this mission of mobilizing the business community to support refugees worldwide. And just a few years later, we now manage a partnership of more than 200 large companies, including all of your companies that are supporting refugees in the United States, Canada, and all over the world. In terms of what we do as an organization, we provide pro bono support to companies to help them with their refugee engagement in a number of different ways. We help companies develop a strategy for how they're best positioned to support refugees. We share best practices with companies for corporate engagement with refugees through guidebooks, trainings, and events. And we connect companies to local implementing organizations to work with when they're interested in moving forward with a project to support refugees. We don't charge anything for companies to join the Tent Partnership or to receive access to our services. Everything that we do is free, and we're really just focused on motivating the business community to do more work on this issue and to make it as easy as possible for them to do so. And we're really thrilled to be partnering on this initiative to support LGBTQ refugees with the Human Rights Campaign. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Keisha to introduce HRC and herself.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Keisha Williams. I am the Director of the Workplace Equality Program at the Human Rights Campaign, and I use she, her pronouns. And at the Human Rights Campaign, we work on a lot of initiatives that really seek to make the world a more inclusive space for LGBTQ plus persons. And we have been thrilled to partner with Tent to provide mentorship to LGBTQ refugees. A lot of the work that we are doing as well concerns creating benchmarks around workplace equality and inclusion, both in the United States and abroad. And we think this is critically important work as all of us spend so much time in the workspace. All the things that we can do to make the environment and the process better is really a credit to each of those individuals and the work of the companies that we work with as well. So thank you, and it's wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keisha, and thank you to the entire team at HRC, you, Ty, Sam, and others for being such wonderful partners with us on this initiative. And with that, I want to pass it over to Steve to introduce himself and his organization.
Sure. Thanks, Yaron. Hey, everyone. My name is Steve Roth, he, him pronouns. I'm the Executive Director at ORAM, the Organization for Refuge, Asylum, and Migration. I'm going to tell you a little bit about ORAM in a minute, but just to tell you briefly about myself, I actually came from the private sector, spent about the first half of my career in the private sector, and immediately prior to this built all of the global programs at Out and Equal Workplace Advocates. So worked a lot with corporations and ERGs, and so really excited to have this share this space with you all and hear about your commitment to advancing LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers. So ORAM is the oldest international nonprofit focused exclusively on the safety and empowerment of LGBTQ refugees. We both help refugees where they are on their journeys through economic empowerment programs and leadership development. And we also help them on the move as they seek to resettle through our legal programs, mentoring and skills development, advocacy work. And we work primarily in what we call transit countries. So after someone has fled their country of origin, but before they've reached a resettlement country like the US and Canada, helping them get to where they're going. And we have really over the last year or two been working hard to better engage corporations on LGBTQ refugee issues. So we're really happy about this great program with Tent and to be here with you today.
Great, thanks, Steve. And I just want to take this time up top to also thank all of the members of the Tent team who have been working so hard on this initiative as well. Des, Ilyana, Chrissy, Diana, Nani, Nami, Tim, and others who've really been put a lot of hard work into making this program a success. So with that, I'm gonna share my screen again. And what we want to start off with today's conversation is just by providing you with a little bit more information about the LGBTQ refugee context in North America and why we decided to launch this mentorship program for LGBTQ refugees here in the United States and Canada. So just to start with some definitions, just to make sure everyone understands who we're talking about today. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their home country because of a well-founded fear of persecution or violence. And a refugee is actually a legal classification by a government, the American, Canadian, or other government, or by an international organization, officially recognizing somebody as having that well-founded fear of persecution or violence. Another term that you might hear in this space is an asylum seeker in the United States or a refugee claimant in Canada, who is somebody who has fled their country of origin and has formally applied for asylum or for refugee status, but is waiting for that legal determination around whether they're going to be classified as a refugee. And then the last category that you might hear often in the migration space is an economic migrant, who's someone who deliberately chooses to move to a new country to improve their life, mainly for economic reasons. And for the purposes of today's conversation, we're focusing on forcibly displaced people, so refugees, asylum seekers, and refugee claimants who have been forcibly displaced from their home. In terms of the context here in North America, we see that Canada and the United States each respectively host a few thousand LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers. And when we think about LGBTQ refugees, we're mainly thinking about them in two main subgroups. The first group are those who have fled persecution related to their sexual orientation or gender identity. Unfortunately, same-sex relations are criminalized in about 70 countries around the world, with the death penalty imposed in about a half dozen of those. And there are high levels of persecution and violence against the transgender community worldwide, all of which unfortunately forces people to flee their home country to seek safety abroad. There are then a second subgroup of LGBTQ refugees who fled conflicts like the ones in Syria, Venezuela, and Afghanistan, but who face additional challenges from an integration perspective as LGBTQ individuals. And one of the biggest challenges that we see LGBTQ refugees face once they arrive in a country like the United States and Canada is in finding jobs and in economically integrating into their new host country. And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case, but one of the main reasons is that there's a real lack of infrastructure of support for LGBTQ refugees from an economic integration perspective. And so there are wonderful NGOs that are focused on supporting LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers, but they're mainly focused on legal services. So they're mainly focused on helping somebody win their legal asylum case in a country like the United States or Canada. And then they unfortunately very rarely provide follow-up support in terms of job placement and other types of wraparound services. And then there are the more traditional refugee-focused NGOs that work with the broader refugee population, but they almost never have specific programming for LGBTQ refugees and don't understand how they need to tailor their programming to meet the needs of this specific population. And so as you've identified this gap in terms of the infrastructure of support for LGBTQ refugees from an economic integration perspective, we believe that the business community has a really important role to play in addressing this gap, and that specifically mentorship by LGBTQ employees and allies at companies is a really effective and powerful way for companies to help LGBTQ refugees integrate economically into their new host countries. And that's really where all of you come in terms of your involvement in this mentorship program. So we kicked off this LGBTQ refugee mentorship program in North America in December of 2020, where Tent and HRC co-hosted the first ever North American Business Summit on LGBTQ refugees, where over 20 companies stepped up to mentor LGBTQ refugees in the US, Canada, and Mexico. And just a few months ago, in September of 2021, we expanded this initiative to the United Kingdom in partnership with Stonewall, which is the UK's leading LGBTQ rights organization, and similarly hosted a UK business summit on LGBTQ refugees, where again, over 20 companies announced commitments to mentor LGBTQ refugees, both in the United Kingdom and in North America. And so some of your companies have already been mentoring LGBTQ refugees for a year who joined us at the North American Business Summit. And some of your companies are a little bit newer to this topic who joined us at that UK Business Summit. At both summits, we asked companies to commit to mentoring 50 LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers over the course of 3 years. And we're really thrilled that we're now working with more than 47 companies who've collectively committed to mentoring over 2,000 LGBTQ refugees in North America and the United Kingdom over the next 3 years, and are incredibly grateful for your companies and for all of you for stepping up on this issue and really helping us address this challenge, focus on the economic integration of LGBTQ refugees in the North American and British context. So with that and that little bit of context, what we want to do next is provide you with a sense of the topics that you should be covering in your mentorship experience with your mentee, and really share with you the resources that we've developed in order to make this program successful. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Steve to talk you through this next section.
Great, thanks so much, Yaron. Again, great to be here with everyone. So we'll just jump right in here and share. You'll see on the image there is a screenshot of the guide. This is the guide to corporate mentorship programs for LGBTQ refugees. This is really the core text or tool for the program. Hopefully by now you've received it, or you'll be getting the link in the chat here. This guide was written by us, by ORAM, on behalf of Tent, and together with great input from Tent and HRC. And it really combines and leverages our expertise in the LGBTQ refugee and asylum space with our corporate background and experience. The guide is divided into 3 parts. The first is the pre-read, which really covers a lot of the information that Yaron was just sharing. Then there's a guide for mentorship coordinators, the folks at your companies who organize your programs. And then the third main piece, that's of course most relevant for everyone on this call here, is the guide for mentors. And that's within the overall guidebook. And that starts around on page 30. And that's your key resource. It starts with an overview and tips, and then it gets into the curriculum for the mentorship sessions, which is what we're gonna spend the next 15 minutes or so talking about. So we have a next slide, please. Great. So as a mentor, just to kind of level set at the beginning here, your primary objective is really to support your mentee in their career and professional development. So it's obviously more career focused versus psychosocial focused. We have this core curriculum that we're going to get into. And so based on that, mentors are expected to have 4 meetings over 1 year with your mentee to discuss some key topics. Each meeting, we recommend an hour to an hour and a half. You'll get a feel, I think, after your first meeting for how much time you need or how much time you both have available. And we certainly encourage mentors to meet with their mentees more often, if that's possible, if that's something that you both want. But again, that's up to you. For 4 meetings over the course of 1 year is kind of the baseline. And while we try to give you as much of a clear outline and structure as possible, know that this curriculum is just meant to be a guide. We really encourage you to tailor your meetings and your relationship to the needs of your mentees. But we wanted to give you a good place to start. So with that, if we could go to the next slide, we will jump right into the first meeting with your mentee, which will be around career planning. And as you look into the guide, you'll see that each of these 4 curricula sessions are broken down into 3. The meeting plan has 3 basic topics. So the purpose of the meeting, exercises, and next steps. And so the purpose of this first meeting, not surprisingly, first and foremost, is to get to know your mentee. So, this is an area where you may have to take a bit of the lead. Your mentee may be shy or a little uncomfortable with the setting. So great chance for you to tell your mentee about your own professional history and what your goals are, maybe how your LGBTQ identity or role as an ally has played a part in your career. I think that would be really interesting and relevant to them. And then, of course, you want to segue into beginning a conversation around your mentee's career goals. Is there a particular industry that they're interested in? What's their professional experience or maybe their relevant educational experience? What are their longer term career aspirations? And then shifting from that, actually starting to establish some goals and expectations for the mentorship. We really recommend and find it's helpful to write down some goals. It can really help both sides be a little more accountable. And again, in terms of, we'll talk more about setting expectations, but help them understand that you're there to support the professional development, but at the same time, you're not able to guarantee them a job. This isn't going to end in a job, although hopefully with the tools that you're giving them, they'll be better positioned to find a job. And then finally, the next steps are really just setting some deadlines for anything that you want to do before your next meeting. Again, really establishing some expectations around timing and cadence for when you'll meet, and maybe even setting your next meeting time. And that will conclude your first session. But before I move on, Yaron or anyone else want to jump in with any additional observations?
Yeah, sure. I would love to add 2 things based on things that we saw with the first year of the mentorship program, because we had this cohort who started in December of 2020. So we've had kind of 1 year of this mentorship program so far. And I want to highlight 2 things about this session. One is that there's going to be a real range in terms of like how specific career interests a lot of the mentees have. So some mentees are going to come in and are going to say, I want to be a graphic designer for a media outlet. And what I need support on is I need to know how to get to that step. And I need guidance on a lot of very concrete things, but I know very concretely where I'm headed and what I want to focus on. And some people are just going to come in and are going to say, I want a good job that can sustain me and my loved ones. And that might be it. And so there's going to be a real range for what folks will experience as mentors in this program. And so you'll have to adjust accordingly based on the amount of specifics that your mentee is really providing you upfront, and really adjust accordingly and really help them, if they're not as clear about what their career goals are, really help them brainstorm what those options could look like. And then just the second thing that I want to flag is that sometimes it takes time to build trust with the mentee. And so if in their first session, as Steve mentioned, if somebody is being more shy, please feel free to try and take the lead here and really also recognize that it will take time to build that rapport with somebody, and that if they're not the most open right away, that's also okay. You'll hopefully be able to really continue to develop a strong relationship over time.
Great. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So your second meeting will be focused on those 2 tried but true tools, resume and cover letter. It would definitely be helpful to have your mentee bring a resume and cover letter with them, or share them with you in advance so that you all can discuss some specifics. And in terms of the purpose of this meeting, it's really to explain what both a resume and a cover letter are for, and how they factor into the job search process, particularly in the context of the US and Canadian markets where you're based. Any particular nuances, there will be a lot of differences culturally between length of resume and style and how formal or informal. So it will be helpful to get clear on what the norms are around both resumes and cover letters here or in Canada, depending on where you are. This is also a great time to bring in LinkedIn and talk a little bit about LinkedIn. It's, I think it's such a go-to platform for just about everyone on the professional front. it might be helpful to talk about the similarities and differences between LinkedIn and a resume. You could look at them together. You might even encourage your mentee to pull up their LinkedIn profile if they have one, and you can work on it together. If not, you can help them set one up. Do be mindful that refugees are coming from very challenging contexts. They may or may not be comfortable having a full presence on social media. So just be aware of any security concerns that they might have, and have some sensitivity around that. And then beyond that, just work with them to really help them strengthen their resume and cover letter template. You all can do some work on that together. And in terms of next steps, really maybe have them just work on further revisions and edits. You might consider having them send some practice emails or documents to you, some things that you can proofread for them as well. I'll pause there, see if anyone has anything else they want to add in.
Yeah, I would just add that I think this section around resume and cover letters is one of the ways that we have heard is like really one of the most tangible and impactful ways that mentors were able to help their mentees. A lot of folks really need some guidance on just kind of what those best practices are in the US and Canada. I just want to add that I think one thing to cover in all of these, and I think this is true of resume and cover letters, is also how you could potentially be public if somebody wanted to be about your LGBTQ identity in a resume and cover letter, and what the kind of how to go about doing that, and how to think through those questions. And I think Steve mentioned that some folks might be more cautious about doing that based on their own lived experience as somebody who might have had to flee because of persecution related to their sexual orientation or gender identity. So just sharing kind of what those range of options could look like. And then I just wanted to add on the LinkedIn point that one of the things that we did in 2021 to supplement the mentorship program is that we had companies who are participating in the mentorship program run training webinars that kind of added on to what, for the mentees, added on to what you would be covering during your time together in these one-on-one mentorship relationships. And CIBC, which is a very large Canadian bank, ran a wonderful training webinar for mentees on how to build their brand online. And that included how to build a LinkedIn profile. And so we'll make sure to share those training webinars with all of you and the program coordinators at your companies, so that you can share that with your mentees in case they're looking for more of a deep dive into how to build a LinkedIn profile as well.
Great. So we can go on to the next slide. Third meeting topic is the interview process, the all-important interview. This will be an important meeting. There's a lot to cover, probably, again, a lot of cultural differences here. First and foremost, just review interview fundamentals and skills, maybe share what you have found works best, strategies for performing well in interviews here in the US and Canada. A few topics always worth mentioning: punctuality. That's one that's obviously very important in an interview, but can vary by culture. So good to have a clear understanding of what expectations are where you are and where your mentee is now. Dress code as well, something good to talk about. Personal appearance, communications, level of formality. Again, there may be differences from your mentee's home country versus where you are now. Also a good time to talk about, and Yaron was just alluding to this as well, but how open about one's LGBTQ identity your mentee wants to be in their interview setting. Talk about the benefits and the risks, and ways to appropriately disclose if that's something that they want to do. They may not want to, but maybe they do. Even a good time to talk as you're helping your mentee think about an interview, how to evaluate potential employers and their LGBTQ friendliness. Things like checking on their commitment to LGBTQ inclusion policies and practices. Encourage them, of course, to check what their score is on the HRC Corporate Equality Index. There are some resources in the guide as well that can help folks do that. And then it's a great opportunity to conduct a mock interview with them. Do a practice interview. That always helps. We even have included in the guide a link to a mock interview script You can check that out. That can help you, be another tool. And just spend lots of time practicing. And then, of course, the final thing on the interview front is always to help them think about a follow-up to the interview, etiquette around when and where and how to follow up, and norms in terms of when to expect to hear back from a potential employer. And then in terms of next steps, really just perhaps scheduling more practice interviews, or if they are lucky enough to get an actual job interview scheduled, you could do practice with them ahead of that, and just stay in touch with them throughout. Anyone else want to add anything?
I just want to highlight here one thing around kind of making sure that you're tailoring the program to meet your mentees' needs. So last year, we had a question from a mentor come in. They'd just been connected to, they had their first meeting with their mentor, with their mentee. It went really well. And the mentee told them, I actually have an interview next week and I'd love to do a mock interview with you to practice for it. And the mentor had the question, well, that's the third session. Is it okay for me to go out of order in terms of the topics that are covered? And the answer is, of course, yes. We want this to, we're giving you the building blocks. So hopefully you're getting a sense here of like, these are the really critical topics that we think are important in supporting the professional development of an LGBTQ refugee. But again, please tailor it. If you connect with a mentee and they have an interview in the first 2 weeks, it doesn't need to be that it'll just be a quarterly meeting, and you can meet more often. You can tailor, you can use, these are really meant as building blocks. So please adjust accordingly, because interviews are such an important part of any interview process, and can really also, doing a mock interview with somebody and giving them helpful feedback can really help them boost their confidence and feel more comfortable presenting to an American or Canadian employer.
Great, thank you for that, Yaron. So let's go ahead to the final session, which is around networking, and purposes here, certainly to explain the fundamentals of networking. Maybe start with getting a sense of whether your mentee has a professional or personal network here in the US or Canada. Talk about how they can tap into that, or if they don't, how they can start building one. Just some of the cultural norms around networking. Again, this can vary from one culture to the other, how small talk works in a networking setting, types of questions that are appropriate to ask, types that aren't really appropriate to ask. Again, practice always helps. Maybe conduct a mock networking session. It may feel a little awkward, but just pretend you just met each other at a cocktail party, and what kind of chit chat you would have. And a good opportunity to discuss your experience networking as an LGBTQ person, if you identify as LGBTQ, how you've navigated being out or not being out in that context. And then we're lucky within our community, the LGBTQ community, to have a lot of great networking opportunities, whether they're queer professional groups or sports teams or ERGs, and discuss tools for networking within those groups, how to plug into those as well. And so then, as you kind of wrap up your discussion on networking, this is technically your last session if you haven't planned others. So it's a good time to wrap it up with discussing any expectations for your relationship after the mentorship program concludes, whether you want to stay in touch, how you want to stay in touch, how much time you can or can't offer, whether you're willing to share connections, all those sorts of things. And then finally, in terms of next steps, we do have a survey that we've created. So the mentee will most likely be getting a survey. You can let them know that will be coming, and we encourage everyone to fill that out. And that is it for your formal mentoring sessions as laid out in the curriculum. Yaron, anything else, observations on that one?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think one of the reasons why this networking is such an important topic is because many folks who are new to a country like the US or Canada don't necessarily have that extensive professional network. And so one of the ways that you can also be really helpful as a mentor is obviously practicing a lot of these networking skills, but also helping open up your Rolodex to connect them to other folks who can really help them advance in their career. And so even if your mentee doesn't exactly meet your specific career interests, like there was a mentor who was working with that graphic designer who I mentioned earlier. The mentor himself wasn't a graphic designer, but was able to connect his mentee to a number of friends who were graphic designers who he knew from just the LGBTQ community in New York, who are more than happy to connect with his mentee. And if you yourself don't have any, ask the other mentors at your company if they know anybody. And even if you want to ask us at the 10 team if we have any relevant connections, please do so, because I think one of the best things that you can do for your mentee is actually facilitate introductions to people who can really help them advance in their career. So really do want to emphasize the importance of networking, both in terms of practicing those skills, but also in terms of actually like facilitating some relevant introductions.
Great. Thanks, Yaron. All right, let's go ahead and move on. So we're going to move into this next chunk, which is tips for mentoring LGBTQ refugees. We're running a few minutes late, so I'm going to try to be a little more top line here. Just a reminder, you all will get access to this presentation as Yaron shared, and a lot of this is in the guide as well. But just to kind of tee it up for you, in terms of understanding your role as a mentor, know what your role is and what it isn't. It is definitely to help your mentee identify their career goals and create plans to achieve them. This is going to be really valuable for LGBTQ refugees because many of them resettle without families and without a social network. It's one of the things unique to queer refugees. So this will be a real lifeline on the professional front. Your role is to serve as a guide and a connector and a sounding board. But remember that we're really looking for people to give more guidance than solutions. Also, you're not a case manager. This isn't a program focused on a mentee's psychosocial needs, which may also be significant, but know what your limitations are. Do provide ideas and tools and skills. Like Yaron just said, point people to resources. If you don't have the answer, you're definitely not expected to be the expert on everything. But do be a role model. Think of this as an opportunity to be a role model, and provide all that practical advice on the 4 topics that you're going to cover in your in the curriculum. And also don't forget, use it as an opportunity to learn from your mentee too. Mentorships are always two-way streets, and both parties have a chance to learn. So hopefully it will be a great and fun experience for you. It is not a platform to tell your mentee what to do. You're not expected to be an expert on everything. You're not expected to give your mentee a job or to find one for them. And you're not expected to be their best friend, although friendships have certainly developed out of the mentorship program. Any other observations?
The only thing that I just want to add from our perspective based on the first year of the program is just to re-emphasize that this is a professional development program. So in the situation where your mentee is facing challenges, let's say related to housing or healthcare or other kind of more basic humanitarian needs, that is not your responsibility as a mentor to deal with that situation, nor are you prepared to do so. So in situations where those types of things arise, please flag those immediately for your program coordinator at your company, who will then notify the tent team, and we will figure out kind of the best plan to move forward that makes the most amount of sense for your mentee. But I do just want to emphasize that this is a professional development program and is not set up to support the social services of LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers.
Great. Next slide. There we go. Be aware of important sensitivities around the background of refugees, particularly trans refugees. I think it goes without saying, but your mentee will likely have a very different lived experience than you. We know from working with refugees every day, a lot of them come with a lot of trauma in their story. Folks are often literally fleeing for their lives. And this is particularly the case for trans and gender nonconforming refugees. Just be aware of that. Be sensitive to boundaries. I think we're all curious and want to know a lot about a person that we're talking to, but try to avoid asking detailed questions about their experience in their country of origin. It would, very much be an innocent question from your side, but it could stir up triggering and traumatizing experiences for them, particularly things around families, and political situation, or any specifics that led them to flee their country. That may be something that will come up, but we encourage you not to ask that. You can certainly ask them about what their professional experience was. Again, that's the lane for this interview. So maybe start there. Bear in mind that our customs and lifestyle are probably new and foreign to them, and LGBTQ refugees might also have different norms and understandings about sexual orientation and gender identity than you do. So be aware of that, and certainly don't make any assumptions about your mentees identity based on their appearance or way of dressing. We encounter this a lot. Folks that identify as trans, gender non-conforming, which potentially, we might not have guessed that based on appearance or our Western notions about what that means. So, from the very outset, of course, be sure to ask them how they'd like to be addressed, what name they go by, their pronouns, etc. Obviously share the same for you. And again, just bear in mind that particularly notions around gender identity may be different than ours or yours. So.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to add here as we go to the next slide is just that the folks participating in this program are also coming from really all over the world. So also the situation that LGBTQ refugees face from their kind of country of origin really differs pretty tremendously. And so there's no kind of we're not just working with one segment of the LGBTQ refugee population, but really the mentees in this program really are coming from very, very diverse backgrounds and experiences.
Cool, and that's a good segue to our next topic, which is tailor your support to your mentees' career goals. So, first and foremost here, I would say just be flexible, get to know what your mentees' career goals are. Hopefully you'll learn that in your first meeting with them. As we've said before, mentees come from a variety of different backgrounds. They have different career interests. Some may be looking to get a customer service job or a security guard job. Others may have aspirations to be a corporate executive. And so be open to meeting your mentee wherever they are, whatever their goals are. And, they may or may not be interested in your career area or the industry that you work in. Although I know that that Tent was able to fine tune their pairing system. And so hopefully there more of that pairing by interest area experiences happening. Certainly discuss both short and long-term career goals. Be conscious of the fact that refugees often need immediate opportunities, basic income stream. They may have challenges due to the language and other things. Sometimes their experience is not transferable. That's the other thing. A lot of refugees leave successful careers in their countries of origin and they have to start over, and sometimes their accreditations or experience doesn't count, so they're gonna have to reestablish themselves. And then on the other side, you may have, there may be some refugees, or you may have a mentee that just wants to start completely fresh. So point of all that is really get to know your mentee and tailor your support to what their goals are. Anything else? No? Good. Okay, so managing your mentee's expectations about the mentor relationship. We've talked about this before. It's really important, and it's up to you as the mentor to take the lead on this. Be clear about what they can expect from the relationship. Some of the things we talked about is a professional and career-focused mentoring relationship to help them become a stronger candidate for employment. You can not guarantee them a job, but you can guarantee to help them get better prepared for one. And then the things that you can help them with, the things in the lesson plan, like your own said, connecting folks, if you're willing to do that with people in your networks, advocating for them, being a role model, introducing them to other groups and people, and just be upfront with them about what you can't do as well. It will make life easier for everyone if everyone's kind of honest and upfront about that. And do consider whether you're willing to meet. Everyone's going to go into the program with this baseline understanding there will be 4 meetings in the year. The mentees are expecting that as well. But think about whether you'd be willing to meet with or talk with your mentee more than that. And if so, communicate about that up front, and then you can both be on the same page.
Yeah, and I would just add that a sizable number of the mentor-mentee pairs in the first year of the program did meet more often than that, or were in touch more often than that. So we're able to communicate by email, text, whatever it might be. And so just to say, I think really, hopefully one of the clear messages you're getting is that you need to tailor your support to meet your mentees' needs. So it's about managing your mentees' expectations, but also really asking them how much the best ways that you as a mentor can support their professional development.
Exactly. Great. And then our last tip here is model appropriate behavior and conduct. And again, at the end of the day, this is a mentorship program. So we hope you can each be a role model, be the mentor that you would have liked to have had as, when you were early in your career, and really focus on trustworthiness. We know that applies to every relationship, but in particular this case, please respect confidentiality. Trust is particularly important for queer refugees. Again, a lot of them have faced a lot of mistrust or violations of their trust. So they're going to be looking to that. They may be a little hesitant until they feel that they have that sense of trust. That's being said, obviously, if someone discloses that they're in danger or at risk of hurting themselves or hurting someone else, of course, that's something that you need to share with your mentor coordinator as soon as possible. All of your company's sexual harassment policies apply to the mentor-mentor relationship. I think that goes without saying, but no participant in the mentorship program should ever be made to feel intimidated or coerced or unsafe. As we've stressed throughout, this experience is really a professional mentorship program, and it's professional in nature, and so that should be reflected in the conduct of both parties. Not surprisingly, sexual and romantic relationships between mentors and mentees are prohibited, as well as sexually suggestive comments. And one other thing that I just want to flag in this area is that obviously LGBTQ refugees are coming from extremely oppressive societies and contexts. And we see that sometimes there's this kind of jarring experience of being in a place like the US or Canada, where they might experience a lot more freedom, and they can be in workplaces that are affirming of their sexual orientation and gender identity. You as the mentor are either openly queer or an ally of the community. And sometimes that can lead to a lack of awareness of what is appropriate behavior for a work environment. People kind of want to bring that freedom they're feeling to the work environment. I've seen this happen, and sometimes they will kind of overshoot that mark. So if you ever feel uncomfortable with your mentees' behavior, or if you think it's inappropriate, be sure to notify your mentorship coordinator, and you two can discuss a strategy for how to bring that to their attention or how to handle it. So yeah, not to be a big Debbie Downer, but just to frame out some of those things to think about as you prepare the role.
And yeah, we're not sharing this information to scare anybody, but just to make sure that you know how to handle situations like this. So, right, if somebody indicates that they're putting themselves in danger or putting someone else in danger, I just want to emphasize that you should immediately notify your program coordinator, who will relay it to the tent team, and we'll figure it out. In the first year of the mentorship program, we did not have any cases like that, but in case it does happen, we do want you to know kind of how to handle that appropriately. And then secondly, in terms of same thing on the sexual harassment front, if anything is communicated to you in written form and verbal form that makes you feel uncomfortable, that you think violates your company's sexual harassment policies, please do notify us. That did happen with one of the mentor-mentee pairs in the first year of the mentorship program. This is one case out of hundreds of mentor-mentee pairs, but we kind of handled that situation appropriately once the mentor notified the program coordinator, who notified the tent team. So please, hopefully one of the things that is getting across is that you do have support here. You have support from the other mentors at your company, from the program coordinator, as well as from the tent team and other organizations that we work with. So please don't feel like you have to handle any complex situations yourself. But in fact, the best thing that you can do when dealing with a complex situation is notifying your program coordinator, who will bring it to the attention of the tent team.
Sure. And I think that's it for my part. It was great to be here as part of this. I will put my contact info in the chat in case anyone has any other questions for us at ORAM. But thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. And so next, what I want to do is we're going to transition into a conversation with a mentor from Accenture who participated in the first year of the mentorship program. So Keisha and Lee, if you want to come on video, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let them take it over. I see that there are a lot of questions in the chat. So just as a reminder, please continue putting those in, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keisha.
Hello again, everyone. And as Yaron mentioned, one of the things that we find is quite useful is for folks to hear a little bit about the personal experience of a prior mentor. So we're very happy to have Lee DuTemple with us today. Lee uses she, her pronouns. Lee is a facilitator and engagement lead with Accenture's Canada Innovation Hub, where she helps companies tackle their toughest problems in terms of their environment, social settings, and governance. She is an organizing member of Accenture's Pride Employee Resource Group and is the coordinator for the Tent Mentorship Program alongside her co-lead Abbas. She joins us today from Toronto. So welcome, Lee.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. So I really want to start by talking a little bit about Accenture and how Accenture got involved. So back in December of 2020, Accenture joined the Tent Initiative to provide mentorship to LGBTQ refugees, at the time pledging 50 refugees in North America over 3 years. So you served both as a program coordinator for the initiative, as well as a mentor yourself. Why did Accenture decide to join this initiative to mentor LGBTQ refugees?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's been an amazing program to be a part of, both as a coordinator and a participant. So happy to be here, share anything I've learned along the way. My co-lead, Abbas, and I, shout out to Abbas, we entered into this program with bright eyes and not quite sure what to expect, but we kind of went into it thinking if we could make a difference in the life of one person, then that would be a win and a success for us. And it's really been truly impactful. Accenture is a global consulting firm, and we have a pretty long history with Tent. We've done a number of joint initiatives since 2016 together, and do a lot of work at a global scale to support or kind of work with the global refugee crisis. So it was a natural fit from that perspective, but kind of more importantly, it's just the right thing to do. We have a lot of really talented folks at Accenture from a lot of different backgrounds and skill sets, and they're passionate about engaging with community and giving back. And we also have a really engaged employee resource group for the Pride Network. So it felt like a natural fit and was really values aligned at the highest level for our organization.
And what was your experience like mentoring a refugee, and how were you able to support your mentee's career?
Yeah, it was great. My mentee and I got along really well from our first meeting. We kind of clicked. We share a lot of similar interests, and he was looking to get into a field pretty similar to, my prior experience. So I was really impressed with the breadth of experience that he brought with him, and it was very diverse. I think that's a pretty common story you see with a lot of the refugee mentees. I see it in our profiles as well as we're doing matches. I think just out of kind of the circumstance that they're coming from. So for us, my mentee was gainfully employed, remains gainfully employed, but not in the industry that he wants to be in. So part of my role with him has just been helping him find that focus and understand the types of jobs that might be available to him and what pieces of that prior experience are going to be the most relevant, and how to kind of narrow in all of that experience so he's not telling the story of, sales experience here and digital marketing experience here and this here and that there, like really kind of picking out the key pieces that are all relevant to the work he's, trying to go after. There were also, ways that there's a lot of great training available and sort of credentials. So helping him get credentialed for the market here. In digital marketing, there are a lot of great free courses that are legitimate and sort of requirements for getting an entry-level job. So sharing those resources with him and kind of sharing the key publications that are relevant for the industry and in the market, so that he can sort of get tapped into the trends and understand the way that people talk about that industry. And then also supported with some networking. I had some gaps in my own experience that I couldn't speak to, so I was able to connect him to someone within my organization who was willing to speak to him. I saw this as a question in the chat around sort of how you might introduce your mentee in that sort of circumstance. So I approach that with sensitivity. You want to be careful that you're not, disclosing anything sensitive or tokenizing anyone. So, just saying this is my friend and colleague. They're looking for support with this kind of thing. Can you help them understand, this part of your experience? I think that was really valuable and gave him someone else that he could reach out to if he had more questions. And then we also did, resume reviews. I was a point of referral for a job application he did. And ultimately through all this, I think just a friendly face he could reach out to.
Well, it seems like you had a really incredible relationship with your mentor. What are some of the successes you can point to in that mentorship relationship?
Yeah, I think one of the most practical examples was, and this was a great example of just coming with an open mind as a mentor. When he first sent me his resume, it was something like 12 pages long, and I was kind of like, whoa. I was a little shocked, and you take for granted sort of the accepted practices and standards that you might be used to in your own context. So what we were able to do is kind of do a bit of a workshop where I shared some feedback, did some annotations on his resume, but then walked through, here's what I'm seeing here. Here's what's resonating for me as a viewer of this. And we were able to pare that down to 4 pages. And now again, we'll keep paring it down to try to get it down to 1. I was comfortable sharing my resume. So I showed him what mine looks like to give him an example of what good might look like, and also shared I have a blank template that he could use to help with some of that formatting to kind of get it to the polish and presentation you might expect. And then sort of through that, we've just become close. To me, that's a personal success too, just him feeling like I'm someone he can reach out to, and me wanting to be there. And then more broadly in our program, we had some mentors who were able to help their mentees land their dream job. That was like one of the best pieces of feedback to hear from one of our mentees. And some have to, establish some of those bi-directional relationships where their mentee had a ton of great experience. So they've kind of established this two-way connection, and they, some of them feel like they're long-term contacts, which is just amazing. The adaptability of our mentors in this program has truly been amazing.
Awesome. And with discussing successes, we also want to talk about some of the challenges. So what are some of the challenges that you faced in the relationship, and how did you address those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it's a year-long program and life happens. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we notice. Sometimes people just drop off. And, for me, there was a gap of a few months when I didn't hear back from my mentee, and things got busy for me too. And it can be hard to sort of keep that line of communication open. And what I learned from that is just being patiently persistent. My mentee eventually replied and had a lot of personal stuff going on. And for me to just sort of be that little ally in his corner, kind of checking in and still there, even when I didn't necessarily, hear back, he said was really meaningful. So a small token like that can really go a long way. And so just being patient, but also, present is a good way to help work through that.
Awesome. And as a coordinator for the mentorship program at Accenture, how has Accenture supported mentors, and are there best practices you can share for other companies who are establishing their programs?
Yeah, the guide from Tent and ORAM is really fulsome, and I think the context that Steve and Yaron just walked us through is really important to keep in mind, and what makes this sort of a different type of mentorship program. So definitely read through those materials. And we helped our mentors navigate some of those. So sort of highlighting the key pages that they should look at so that they're not overwhelmed by this 80-page document. It's like, don't worry, you only need to read these pages as a mentor. We also tried to establish one-on-one check-ins with each of our mentors, just, a simple ping on the side, keep those lines of communications open. And this year, Tent has developed a tracker to help program coordinators keep track of the conversations that they're having with their mentors. That was really helpful. Boss and I sort of did that informally last year, and it was really helpful for us to understand, okay, who's having recurring conversations, who might need a little bit of extra support, or, it happens where maybe the matches don't go beyond maybe the first conversation because, again, life just happens. So kind of keeping those lines of communication open. We set up a Teams channel, or if you use Slack, just set up a channel where people can maybe share some resources like, hey, I found this great resource on resume reviews, or I have this question that my mentee asked. Has anyone had a conversation like this? We also had a lot of applicants this year, which was amazing, but it meant we could only accept around 15% of the applicants. And so one of the things that we want to do is how can we explore keeping those folks engaged who have expressed an interest in participating, but maybe just didn't have the right profile match for the needs that Tent shared with us. So we're looking at, keeping those people involved so that if someone does have a mentee who says, I need help with this, we can still reach out to that network and maybe set up the mentee with a backup or a secondary mentor so that, when life happens, there's someone else who might be able to support. Tent facilitates some really awesome working group calls with the other organizations, so you can learn a lot from those and kind of share feedback. I think it was a really great open forum for us to build on last year. And those training sessions like the resume workshop, shout out to CIBC for that one. Those are great resources. And then ultimately, I think one of the things that has been a good learning for Abbas and I was we wrote an end of year report, just a simple report to say, here's what the program was, what our expectations were, the matches that we got, what that looked like throughout the year, and any sort of learnings and major wins that we got out of that, so that not only can we share this report back with Tent to say, here's how our program went, here's some things we noticed, some things we want to do better, some things, you might want to consider as we evolve the program. And we had some really great discussions with Yaron and the team around that. But we also were able to use that report to share with our internal champions and stakeholders to say, this is why this program matters. We've made this 3-year commitment. If you need help getting, as a coordinator, need help getting resources mobilized to help you do that work, your end of year report can be a really valuable tool in getting that done.
So what advice would you provide to the many folks who are on this call today, some of which are mentors for the very first time? What advice would you give to those folks who are starting the process?
Yeah, I think Stephen, your own touched on a lot of really great ones. So I'll maybe underline some of the ones that really resonated with me. I think coming with an open mind is really important. It's so easy to take for granted what you know by default in the context that you live in. But the examples that Steve gave around punctuality or how you present yourself, simple things like that, and demonstrating those things, that can be really, really powerful. So try not to assume too much as you enter into the relationship. Try to put yourself in the shoes of maybe being fresh in an industry and not knowing a lot about it, and think about the sort of basics, the fundamentals, and start there. And listen to your mentees' needs, immediate needs, and meet them where they are. My mentee was gainfully employed, not in the right industry, but the financial need wasn't as urgent, so it allowed us to focus on some of these things like reskilling. You may not have the same background as your mentee. A lot of our mentees on our list had a lot of industries listed, so we did our best to do matches mostly based on language, and sometimes around city if we could do it. And that diversity of experience is likely a result of them adapting to their circumstance. So try to listen for the biggest stories that they have that they can share, and help them cater that to their experience here. And just focus on their immediate career goals and how you can help them, support them with that. Just working with your mentee can really help them increase their chances of landing a job. So you don't need to follow the program guide to a T, like each session needs to follow the same topics, but there's so much valuable information in there. So sort of scan through and see what you think your mentee might need, and really just remember the value of a small, simple gesture, like reaching out and checking in, can go a really long way for someone who might not have all those support resources.
So this has been incredibly helpful. Thank you so much, Lee, for sharing your experience and some of these best practices that are going to be really helpful for folks. So we appreciate you today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Leah, I just want to also echo my thanks. I want to echo both in terms of the work that you've done individually with your mentee, but also what you and Abbas have done. I think about creating a really thoughtful program for Accenture in Canada. Now excited to expand that to US too, and to really provide us with Tent with really helpful feedback to make this program as effective as possible. So thank you again. So just in terms of what we want to do now, just want to talk through some next steps, and then I see there are lots of questions in the chat, so we'll get to all of those. But I did just see there were a number of questions around what next steps look like, and who you'll hear from, and all of that. So want to cover that for everybody on today's call. So in terms of next steps, if they haven't already, your company's program coordinator will share with you the survey data of an LGBTQ refugee or asylum seeker who signed up to be mentored through this program. In terms of how the refugees themselves heard about this program was actually a referral by a local nonprofit in the US or Canada, and who shared information with them about this program and why it would benefit their career. And then the mentees signed up through filling out an online survey. This is a pretty similar survey to the ones that you all filled out to sign up as mentors for this program. We at 10th then took that data that the mentees filled out, looked at what industries they were interested in, and did our best to match mentees to companies in their fields of interest. So let's say, for example, the mentee expressed interest in working for a financial institution or in the tech sector or whatever it might be. We then tried to connect them to a company in that sector as well. I saw that there was a question in the chat around who is your company's program coordinator, and that's the person like Lee or Abbas at Accenture who's running this program on behalf of the company. It can depends on the company who they are. Many times it can be a lead at your LGBTQ employee resource group. It could be someone from your HR team, but it'll basically be the person who invited you to participate in today's webinar, and they will be the ones who will send you the specific survey data of an LGBTQ refugee who signed up for the program. That survey data will have a lot of helpful information in it about their professional background and interests, what they're hoping to get out of this mentorship program. I saw there was a question about their internet connectivity. That will be included in the survey data. It'll also include some information about their language proficiency in English and other languages, so that you can have a sense of their proficiency in that, and a lot of other good information. So please do utilize the information that was shared with you through that survey. Once you get assigned to a mentee, the next step is to actually reach out to them. And we have developed an email template that we'll put in the chat right now, but we'll also share it with all the program coordinators so they can pass it along to the mentors. And we ask that you use this email template to reach out to your mentee. And the reason that we ask is that in the first year of the mentorship program, one of the things that some mentors did is that they wrote an email saying, "Hi, I'm a mentor through the 10th mentorship program. When are you available to connect?" And the reason that that's a challenge is because we at 10th are not the organization that they necessarily know. They were referred by a local organization, as I mentioned, in the US and Canada. And so it's important in your initial introductory outreach to them to remind them how they heard about this program and how they were referred, just to jog their memory about how they signed up. And what that looks like. So that email template that we've developed really lays that out for you in terms of the information that you should include in your outreach to them. And so we strongly encourage all of you to use that email template when you're initially emailing your mentee. If your mentee speaks another language, we had, for example, a lot of Spanish-speaking mentees in the US this year. Please reach out initially in that other language if you speak it as well. And in many cases, as Lee mentioned, program coordinators were advised to match mentors and mentees who speak other languages outside of English so that they could coordinate. Throughout the mentorship program, you might want to switch to English to help them be able to advance in their English language abilities, particularly when it comes to professional development. But I think it's fine to reach out in your initial outreach in another language. One of the challenges that we had in the first year of the mentorship program was unresponsiveness by some mentees. And so we really wanted to align with companies on what a clear process is going to look like for how to handle a situation where a mentee might be unresponsive. And so the first thing that we're asking all mentors to do is to try emailing their mentee twice. And so again, please use the email template that 10th developed, because that will hopefully really increase your chances of somebody responding. And follow up by email once if the mentee doesn't respond to your initial outreach. And then you can also try texting or WhatsApping your mentee as well if they don't respond to that initial outreach. If the mentee does not respond after those 3 attempts, please then let your company's program coordinator know, and they'll notify us at the 10th team. And we at 10th can reach out to the mentee on their behalf to see what the latest situation is and whether they're still interested in connecting with you. Sometimes that outreach is successful and there was just a miscommunication about the email address that they were using or something like that. But sometimes the mentee's professional or personal needs might have changed between when they signed up for the program and when they're actually hearing from you as a mentor. And so we really appreciate your patience and understanding as we implement this mentorship program in case you are dealing with some unresponsiveness. But as Lee mentioned, definitely one of the recommendations that we advise mentors is to remain patient and persistent in your engagement with your mentees. And so then just lastly, in terms of thinking through how to prepare for your first meeting and kind of thinking ahead what the year was going to look like, please familiarize yourself with the mentorship guide. And I recommend taking a look at 2 sections in particular in advance of your first meeting. One is this pre-read section of the guide that will provide you with more information about the LGBTQ refugee context in North America and include some helpful background information, some of which we covered today. And then I also recommend reviewing the curriculum for that first session, which Steve covered earlier, but good to know because the guidebook goes into a lot more depth. And so good to cover that so you have a sense of the types of things that you'll want to cover in your first meeting together. Moving forward from there, please continue using the guide throughout your mentorship experience. And again, as we've been trying to emphasize, so hopefully it's clear, please tailor the curriculum to meet your mentees' needs. We're giving you the building blocks for how to kind of successfully mentor someone and support their professional development, but each specific mentee's career needs are going to be different. And so you'll have to adjust accordingly in order to support their professional development. And then lastly, please communicate with your program coordinators at your companies on how the mentorship program is going. Many of your companies, as Lee mentioned, will set up Slack channels or Microsoft Teams channels to communicate. You might have quarterly group check-ins or individual check-ins, but please share kind of how things are going. We both want to hear what the success stories have been. We obviously always love to hear when a mentee was supported to get a new job or feels more confident professionally, but we also want to hear kind of what additional resources might be helpful as you think about how we can kind of improve this program as well. And so next, what I want to do while I just provide some wrapping up, we're gonna pull up a video, but about how the mentorship program is going. But what I also want to emphasize is that as that video is being pulled up, is that in addition to the mentorship itself and this one-on-one mentorship relationships, we're also looking for additional opportunities for your companies to deepen their engagement in support of LGBTQ refugees, as well as for the broader refugee population. And so I mentioned in 2021, one of the things that we did was run these training webinars for mentees to supplement the mentorship curriculum. So Hilton ran a great webinar on how to be out as LGBTQ in the workplace. Chobani ran a great webinar on how to find jobs in North America. CIBC did that one about how to build your brand online. And we want to continue running those in 2022. So we hope many of your companies will step up and think about ways in which you can support the mentorship, kind of supplement the mentorship curriculum. And so we'll be in touch with many of you about that. And then lastly, we're also really encouraging all of your companies to think about ways in which they can hire and employ the refugees participating in this program and other refugees as well. It's a big focus of ours at Tent is actually working with companies on their efforts to hire refugees in the US, Canada, and a lot of other markets around the world. So if your companies are interested in that opportunity as well, we would be really thrilled to work with you on that as well. So next, what we want to do before we get to Q&A, and then we have plenty of time for Q&A, is we want to show you a video of 2 mentor and mentee pairs from the first year of the mentorship program so that you can get even more of a flavor for what this experience might look like at your companies.
Well, I think mentoring is just, well, a mentor rather, I think is being a guide to somebody.
Somebody that is gonna impart a good hedge of knowledge into your life.
It's about helping somebody unlock their true potential.
Help you to connect the dots based on where you are and where you want to go.
Is that good enough of an answer? Or I can add more.
Being a lesbian or being a gay or being an LGBT people is kind of a crime in the country of my origin. So because of that, I have to leave.
The refugees in this program have come from places where they're facing persecution for who they are. I think that the mentor-mentee relationship is critical because it gives that space for the mentee to actually be their authentic self.
The idea of really helping LGBTQ refugees to integrate into the workplace here in Canada was really what attracted me.
Coming a country into that you don't have no papers, you don't have no foundation, where you're coming from, especially me coming from an Africa, they look at me as somebody that's from the third world country. So most times those are the problems I face looking for a job.
There's so much unknown, and I think a mentor can really help clear up a lot of that and really help focus in on what the important things are.
It's been good for me because ever since I started working with my mentor, he has directed me in so many things. There's a place I would have made a mistake about my choice of what I want to be in my life.
I went into this thinking that as the mentor, I would be the one bringing the motivation and the inspiration, and in fact, it's the reverse that has happened.
I was able to adjust my resume so that I would have a greater chance of landing an interview. And then from there, really worked on how I would answer the questions once I get there.
I think the most satisfying part is feeling like you have an impact on what your mentee is going through. I mean, for me, finding out Ravon got a new job, like that was huge. That was it. That was the end all be all for me. So like that, yeah, you absolutely feel useful when you hear a good story like that.
Great. So I think now we'll go into Q&A. I see that there are a lot of questions in the chat. Hopefully everyone liked that video, and big thank you to CIBC, Chobani, and Tent and the HRC teams for putting that together. But now we want to leave a lot of time for Q&A. So let's get started, because I see that there are a lot of really fantastic questions. I see my colleague has been trying to type through some of them, but we can take most of those questions live. So I think if all the panelists just want to come back on screen, we can take these questions as fantastic. So I see one question, and Steve, maybe I'm happy to start with this, and then you might want to chime in too. What is your guidance regarding a mentee disclosing their refugee or asylum status to a potential employer? Is this sometimes viewed negatively by employers? So I think the first thing to say is that a refugee does not need to disclose their refugee or asylum seeker status to a potential employer. That is not required. What is required is obviously covering kind of what work authorization documents they might have, and making sure that those are kind of clear and transparent, but they do not need to actually disclose that status to a potential employer. If you're looking for kind of companies that might be more inclusive towards refugees, I think a great resource is obviously the companies who are members of Tent, and you can find that on our website, which is just www.tent.org. And Steve, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there.
Yeah, I would just add that it actually, in at least some US states, it's illegal to ask the immigration status of someone who is interviewing for a job. So that applies to refugee status. So again, it might require doing a little more research to your local context, but my general instinct would be to say, yeah, you do not need to disclose that.
Great. The next question is just, will contact info from our program coordinator be passed on after the call? So hopefully this is clear from my remarks earlier, but just to emphasize, the person who invited you to participate in today's webinar, it should be the program coordinator at your company. So you should have that already in terms of who actually invited you to participate. If it's unclear afterwards, let me know and I can connect you, but it should just be the person at your company who actually invited you to join that call. From another question that we got is from an operational perspective, does the mentorship fit under HRC or ORAM? I ask because our colleagues may be able to receive a financial donation from our company to provide to the organization for giving their volunteer time. I'm going to guess that HRC and ORAM will both be very happy to receive financial donations from any companies who are interested, and we would encourage you to support either of them. And if you want to have a more extensive conversation about other organizations that referred mentees to participate in the program. We're more than happy to give kind of other recommendations as well, but I'll see if Keisha or Steve, there's anything you want to add in case companies want to make financial donations too.
Go ahead, Keisha.
Sure, I'll get started. One, I can put my contact information in the chat. If you are interested, feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with the right folks internally. So in particular, if you do want to give specific to this partnership with TENT, we do have the opportunity to do that and make sure that your donation is specific to this cause. But if folks have additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to me via email.
Great. And I would just add that a lot of ORAM's work is focused on economic empowerment opportunities for refugees. So helping them starting their own businesses, get prepared and trained for the workforce. So, you know, any support could be directed specifically to those programs of companies interested, and we'd be happy to develop some kind of customized program as well. And I'm super grateful for anyone's support. Thank you.
Lee, there's a question here that I think you spoke to that I think might be interesting. We have a question that says, I was wondering if it's ever happened, if there was ever a situation where the mentee asked the mentor to be a reference for a job. And I think you said that you did that. And so maybe you could speak to how you handled that situation. And I'm happy to kind of supplement that in terms of what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, I think it comes down to your comfort level as a mentor. For me, I was comfortable doing it because I had helped my mentee with their resume. And so, you know, we got it to a point where I felt like this is something I could endorse. And he was applying to a company where I was familiar with the folks internally. But I think it does kind of come down to how well you think you could speak to their experience and be a good reference for them. If you don't think you'd have, you know, enough information to share or know enough about their experience, maybe reconsider how, you know, what role you might be able to play in that circumstance. But Yaron, I'll let you supplement with anything I may.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. I think you can just be very transparent with your mentee about what you'd be able to speak to and what not, right? You two haven't necessarily worked together, so you can't necessarily speak about their on-the-job experience. But if you do feel comfortable, like it sounded like Lee was, really speaking to their professional growth, their aspirations, I think you're welcome to do so. But I think good to just be transparent with your mentee about what that situation, what you'd be able to offer and what you can't offer in a context like that.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing to add, I was also able to help him maybe think of someone else who might be able to share that experience, who had more direct working experience with him.
Right. Another question that we had is, do any of the mentees have limitations in terms of employment authorization to work? So in both the US and Canada, the refugees and asylum seekers and refugee claimants have the legal right to work, but it is possible that they won't have received those work authorization documents yet. So that is a question that you can ask your mentee is, what is the status of their receiving their work authorization documents? So they will be able to receive them in both countries, but there might be a delay. And so you are able to ask them that. And in a situation where somebody might be facing a delay, I think you can ask them when they're expecting to receive those work authorization documents, and you can plan accordingly. So maybe then you do much more of the making sure the resume and cover letter is up to speed. They have a very good career plan. And so that once they do actually receive their work authorization documents, you'll be able to move very quickly to actually help them find employment. But it is something that some of the mentees might not have their work authorization documents at the beginning of your relationship. And I don't know if anyone else, Steve or Des, you want to add anything on that? Great. We got another question around kind of mentee backgrounds. And if we have a mentee with career aspirations aligned to one of the other companies within this program, is there a way to communicate with other mentors participating? For example, if my mentee has a background in media for clothing, is there a way for me to get in touch with someone else from Under Armour? They saw their logo on the intro slide, just using them as an example, and obviously a great company. So one of the things that we do for the program coordinators who are participating in this program is that we host quarterly working group calls for them to share lessons and best practices about what's working well in this program and any challenges that they're might facing. And so this is one of the reasons why we really encourage you as mentors to share your experiences with your program coordinators, because then they're going to be participating in these working group calls and sharing those lessons with Tent and the other companies. So let's say it's a mentor at Accenture who's asking, and a connection to Under Armour would be helpful. They could go through that working group channel, or they could ask me at Tent to facilitate an introduction like that. And it's definitely something that we'd be very open to facilitating as needed. And I would also really encourage you to use the other mentors at your company to see if they can facilitate any relevant introductions. Another question that we got is, if appropriate, can the mentor-mentee relationship continue beyond 1 year? And the answer is yes, it can. And particularly just the general rules apply. So everything we mentioned around kind of modeling appropriate behavior, sexual harassment policies, all of that would continue, but what those rules would apply. But formally, the mentor-mentee relationship lasts for 1 year, but if you're going above and beyond that, that is welcome too. And I don't know if anyone else wants to mention anything about kind of post 1 year, how they're thinking about this. Great. We have a question, what should mentors expect in terms of mentees' English language fluency? For those not as fluent, will additional education like ESL be available? So one of the questions that we ask mentors and mentees when they sign up for the program is their level of English language proficiency, as well as their proficiency in other languages. In cases where mentees did not spoke advanced English, we'll assign them to an English speaking mentor, and that is a significant majority of the mentees participating in the program. In cases where a mentee has more limited English language proficiency, we did our best to match them to companies that had mentors who speak that language. So let's say a mentee speaks basic English, but advanced Russian, we assign them to a company who has a mentor who speaks advanced Russian, who will still be able to communicate with them and work with them on their professional development, even though that person does not necessarily speak English proficiently. Another question that's come in is, a couple of times it's been mentioned that this is a professional development program, not psychosocial. Do they have psychosocial support programs too? I'm happy to answer this, but I've been speaking a lot. Steve, do you want to maybe talk about kind of how refugees are more broadly supported in countries like the US and Canada?
Sure, thanks, Jerome. Generally, as part of a refugee's resettlement, they'll be connected with a host of different resources that include psychosocial support, and the resettlement program is just getting kind of back up on its legs again. It was under the last administration, shrunk quite a bit, but as those relationships with service providers are being kind of re-engaged, hopefully those services will continue to expand. Again, I think we discussed this in going through the curriculum. The go-to is always to go back to your mentorship coordinator if there are any issues that come up, and they will connect with the organization that the refugee organization that brought the mentee to them. But beyond that, there are often resources through, if you live in a city, through LGBT community centers and things like that, and there will be other local resources as well. But again, don't try to take those challenges on your own.
Another question, thank you, Steve. Another question that we got was, will mentees generally be in the same country as their mentors? And the answer is yes. Mentors and mentees will always be located in the same country. The US and Canada each have their own nuances in terms of the job market, professional customs, and so you will always be located in the same country as your mentee. In some situations, you might be located in the same city, but in most situations, or at least in half of the situations, you might not be. We really wanted to connect people based off of similar professional interests. And given that so many opportunities are now available virtually to connect, and it's very easy to do so, we kind of prioritize that. And so while some of you might be in the same city, particularly if you're in a larger city like a New York or Toronto, where there's going to be a large concentration of mentors and mentees, you will definitely be in the same country, but not necessarily in the same city. I'm just trying to see if there are any other questions that I missed. I think we might have covered all of them, or Des kind of answered them in the chat. Big thank you to Des for doing that. And just as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and we will be sharing it afterwards. with all of you, along with the guidebook and other resources that are available. So just before we close out, I just wanted to see if any of the other panelists had any additional tips, suggestions, or remarks that they wanted to share with the audience today.
I'll jump in quick. Just to reiterate a point that we made earlier, but a lot of refugees are not coming with the traditional support structures that other refugees do, because they generally are not getting resettled with family members or community members. So this relationship with you, albeit with a professional focus, can really be a lifeline. And so it will be a really great chance for them to know someone and trust someone. And, hopefully they might meet other folks through you. And, hopefully it might continue beyond the year. Again, no expectations, but it's going to mean a lot to this person for sure. So I'm really excited that you all are doing this.
Well, that's a great note to end on. I want to thank Steve, Lee, Keisha, Des for all of your, and Chrissy for all of your help with the presentation today and for presenting so beautifully. And then I really want to thank HRC, ORAM, and the entire tent team for all of their support. And then to all of the companies participating and all of the mentors participating. This really is such a wonderful program. We really saw in the first year how it was able to have a meaningful impact in the lives of LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers here in North America. And so we're really excited for year 2 and excited to support all of you on your journey in this mentorship program. So a big thank you. Please stay in touch with the program coordinators and with the tent team, and very excited to work with all of you in the year ahead. Have a great day, everybody, and we will talk soon.